When was the last time that your soul felt as full as your work calendar? For me, I think it was about 4 years ago. And I believe I know exactly why. And I actually don't think that I'm the only one experiencing this kind of thought right here because at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of people who are living their lives without any sort of higher purpose. And I actually think that's a big reason why we're currently in an epidemic of scrolling. But that might be for another video. What I want to cover today is something that I call a lack of experienced potential. Because I believe that this is the reason why there are that many people in this world who are depressed, lost, scared, and have no idea what they want to do with their life. Because if you really think about it logically, there's a gap between the life that you're living right now and the reality that you want to be living, the one that you visualize in your mind. So what we'll do real quick is keep it simple. We'll close our eyes and we'll visualize exactly that reality, the reality that we view as A tier, S tier even. So for a second, close your eyes and imagine that reality that you step into abundance, whether it be making the money that you want, having the family that you want, driving the car that you want. I don't care what it is, whatever your goal is, sit there for a second and imagine that reality and how you're feeling living in it. Now open your eyes and feel how different this reality is right now in comparison to that one. They do say that comparison is a thief of joy, but that's not the point. What the point is that there's a gap. You can see that reality in your mind. The problem is that you don't know how far away it is from the one that you're currently living right now. This gap is what I call a lack of experienced potential. The reason why you feel so much differently in this reality compared to that one is because you're actually not living to your fullest potential. But the only way to live to your fullest potential is through closing the gap. So to put this into context, back in 8th grade, I set a goal for myself. The goal was to become the best possible baseball player I could be. I was one of the worst baseball players in the world. I was terrible. I faced rejection. I faced mockery from coaches, from teammates, from girls, and I had a ton of setbacks. I got literally cut from 4 teams in a single summer. It was crazy. But I had a purpose, and that purpose was my goal of becoming the best possible baseball player I could be. And it drove me for over a decade. And eventually got to the point where I walked on to one of the best Division III baseball teams in the country. 4 years later, I graduated as team captain, and not only an academic All-American, but an athletic All-American as well. It felt like, in that moment, in those years, that every single day I was living with purpose, a higher purpose. Now, looking back, a big part of that was because I had a very clear-cut identity. I was Nick Carlini, the baseball player. So my entire worldview was filtered through the lens of that baseball player, of becoming the best possible baseball player I could be. And that gave me a ton of purpose. It lit my soul on fire. But what happens is, and I believe this is the part where a lot of people experience this, graduation hit, and I felt like I lost my identity. I went from Nick Carlini, the baseball player, to Nick Carlini. Just Nick Carlini. That was a version of myself that I had never worked on. And I think this happens to a lot of people at certain points in their life. It might be that mom who ends up having her kids move out after 20 years of raising them, right? It might be that corporate Chad who gets fired from his job or laid off from his job, and his entire identity was built around that job. Now he has to go into a new one or into a new field. He doesn't know how to react. But for many of you watching this video, it literally might be the difference between you being a playboy in college and now you're getting fat at your 9 to 5. You don't know how to react because you're living in a different identity. And it's a big problem because if you look at it from a different lens, you've experienced some sort of potential in your life. Maybe you had a girlfriend. Maybe you walked on to a college baseball team. Maybe you were the leader of a frat. But now you've left that lifeline behind. You've entered into a new one. You're on a new journey, but you don't have a clear-cut goal. You don't have a higher purpose, but you do have visualizations. You can imagine that reality where you have that happy family, millions of dollars, or the car that you want. The biggest problem is that you don't know how to get there. And because you don't know how to get there, there is a gap and a lack of experienced potential. So what we need to do is come across the key realization in order to bring us closer and closer and closer to that reality. And the way that I believe we do that is by assigning ourselves a higher purpose rather than waiting for one. Since I've graduated, the past 4 years has been completely dedicated towards Nick Carlini, the person who's trying to get rich. Because I can see the cars, the money, the businesses, the YouTube channel blowing up in my mind. But there's a gap between that reality and this one that I'm living right now. The problem, though, is that I've been trying to do it. That's exactly where I'm going wrong. That's exactly where many people are going wrong. They're trying. And because they're trying, it's creating that gap in experienced potential and the lack of it. So if we want to close the gap, we need to get smart. First off, what we need to do is start trying new things. That word try. But once we find something that we relatively fuck with, there needs to be a commitment to that. Once that commitment is set in place, that's when everything starts to change. But you have to be careful. I found baseball after I was done skateboarding as a child. I loved skateboarding as a kid. All of a sudden, baseball came up one day and I was like, this is it. At that point, what I did was I meshed the sport of baseball and my identity as Nick Carlini together as one. Then I became Nick Carlini, the baseball player. Now what I did was graduate, become Nick Carlini, the actual Nick Carlini, and then I was the guy who was trying to get rich. Instead of connecting the two, be yourself and filter your reality by stepping into the shoes of that best version of you, the one that you visualized in the beginning of this video. That's not going to be Nick Carlini, the baseball player, Nick Carlini, the entrepreneur. No. That's going to be Nick Carlini, or whatever it is that your name is. Nick Carlini, who happens to be an entrepreneur, who happens to be rich, who happens to be the type of man whose identity creates an excess of capital and abundance in his life. And for you, it could be anything else. Could be becoming the best version of yourself, becoming the man. Could be finding your own brand, finding a wife. I don't care what it is. But all the success that you experience in your life should be a byproduct of your identity. And what happens is your identity is exactly what's going to close that gap between the lack of experience potential and potential experienced. You see, my identity was certainly revolving around becoming the best possible baseball player I could be. And as a byproduct of that, I was able to go on a hell of a ride, going from walk-on to All-American to team captain, having basically a C GPA in high school to graduating cum laude, being nationally recognized for my academic achievements. I was able to ride the wave of fortune because my identity was aligned with a higher purpose. But when I hopped off that wave and decided to walk a new path, the one of getting rich financially, I had no identity. I lost that identity because I never spent the time building my own personal identity, my own individual identity. I never focused on the raw version of myself. It was just a baseball player version of myself. So I think the call to action here is that if you're floating throughout life without a purpose, if you feel like there's a gap between the current reality that you're living and a future desired reality, and you understand that that gap feels that much worse because of a lack of experienced potential, then it's time to shift your identity into the version of you who is living the best possible lifeline right now. You do that by thinking differently. You do that by training your body differently. You do that by fulfilling your soul and not your work calendar. Your work will always be there. God will always provide you with money, even when it feels like He won't. But He is waiting for you to capitalize on the ideas that you see in your mind so you can further develop your soul, and as a byproduct, further impact for the positive His creation. You can't do that, though, if you only focus on how bad your current reality is, or you can't get there if you try to get to that future desired outcome, that future desired reality, and you can't get there if your work calendar is more packed and more full than your soul. So at the end of the day, what you need to focus on is shifting into the lifeline, the identity, the mindset, the body, the soul that is completely fulfilled to the execution of its own ideas, its own creative essence, its own godlike essence, to become a better version of yourself. And until you do that, you'll be caught in the gap that feels like you have a lack of potential experienced, when in reality, there's an abundance of experience potential that you can have once you change your identity, once you change yourself, and once you start living true to who you were put on this planet to be.